morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the 7th episode of Red Barn Samplers. My name is Ray Niles, and I'm the designer behind Red Barn Samplers. If you found this channel, then you probably have a love of samplers or just a love of cross-stitch in general. During this episode, we're going to be looking at a couple antique reproductions that are being released today, as well as the availability of W. Wallace as digital download. Going to share with you a little bit about some resources that are online, talk to you a little bit about the lives of some of these young girls that stitch these samplers, and lastly, leave you with a tech tip that you might find interesting in your own personal use on your iOS device. So grab a cuppa, settle in, and let's get started. So first and foremost this afternoon, this evening, or this morning, I want to thank a couple people, specifically Sarah Grimes Evans. She does Sarah's Stitchy Spot on Floss Tube. Delightful, delightful woman, wonderful episode, and she was so kind and gave a shout out to Red Barn Samplers. So Sarah, thank you for that, and thank you for your support and your encouragement. If you want to follow Sarah on Instagram, she's also known as Mistress Page on Instagram. Also, I want to thank Janet Jabber, who has her own YouTube channel as well. Again, very encouraging of the work that I'm doing. Another one is Curious Crafters, another YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, I'd encourage you to do so. I also want to thank Patty Denton. Patty Denton is part of a Facebook group that I've mentioned before called Our Sampler Years. And she took Jemima Fortune Cunningham, the little complimentary sampler from Red Barn Samplers, and she restitched that using kind of a red color, a vibrant red, and it is beautiful. And I just want to shout her out. She did that as her blessing sampler to begin the new year, and I really hope that, Patty, it brings you lots of blessings. So thank you for sharing that with the rest of the world. It's much appreciated. Moving on to some other things that you might find interesting. I've mentioned this on the last 2 episodes, but my goal is to be able to increase my subscribership. So if you like what you're hearing, if you like kind of the quirkiness that comes with Red Barn Samplers, and you're encouraging others to like it as well, then make sure you've subscribed, and down in the comments, if you would write the word Whitney for Whitney Antiques. I have 2 books that I am going to be giving away once we hit our goal. And the goal right now is 4,000 subscribers. So the first one is a book called Samplers and Historic Embroideries, put out by Whitney Antiques. Again, a great resource. And the other one is called Stitched in Adversity, Samplers of the Poor. And I'm kind of partial to this one because I kind of think I like the samplers where the little girls maybe weren't as well off and just used what they had. But again, both of these are delightful books. And if you are interested in being included in that giveaway, make sure you put the word Whitney, W-I-T-N-E-Y, in your comment. And there is no H in Whitney. And once we hit that 4,000 magic mark, I'll be drawing, and I will ship these anywhere in the world. So if you happen to win, you don't have to live in the United States for me to ship that to you. So again, would encourage you to subscribe and tell others about it as well. The other book I want to share with you, this book actually it's a book by Grace Jenkins Goss, and it came from Colorado, the University of Colorado in Loveland, and it's called Scissors and Snippets. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think I have a scissor problem, right? I should be like in a 12-step program. Hi, my name is Ray, and I collect scissors. I love little scissors. I love all kinds of scissors. And this book is fantastic. It gives you lots and lots of images related to scissors. It gives you the history of some of the different types of scissors. It's not just limited to embroidery scissors, but all kinds of scissors and the accoutrements that go with scissors, barbershop shears, trade scissors, just beautiful little scissors. And if you love scissors as much as I love scissors, I would encourage you to add this to your collection. I will put the link down below where you can order this. I literally just called, it's from a museum. I literally just called the museum and gave my credit card, and they sent it to me. I also gave this as a Christmas present to a dear friend, and I think we both have enjoyed just looking through it and really thinking about kind of how we use our scissors and how scissors have kind of been used throughout the ages. So if you like scissors, add this book. It's called Scissors and Snippets. And again, it's by Grace Jenkins Goss. The other thing, you might find this interesting, but sometimes I just get stuck down a rabbit hole, right? That rabbit hole related to samplers, related to the history of the little girl, and just thinking about what life was like and wanting to know more. And I stumbled onto the National Gallery of Art. I don't know how I got there, but I got to the National Gallery of Art and I just typed in the search term sampler. And there were hundreds of samplers that you could click on and they would enlarge and it would tell you about the person that stitched it or the information that they had about it. If you are as crazy about samplers as I am, I would encourage you to go check out the National Gallery of Art online and just type in the word sampler and you'll get hundreds of searches that you can also look through as well. I really liked it. I thought it was fun. I also want to give a little shout out and a thank you to Sherry Walker. Sherry actually does some model stitching for me and her work is beautiful. And we were talking last week on one of the samplers that she's stitching for me and she asked me, was it this color or this color? And I said, well, I think it's this color. And she goes, well, do you use CodyHoover.com? And I said, nope, I don't know who Cody is and I've never heard of CodyHoover.com. And she said, you need to check this out because CodyHoover.com, you can put in the number that you have from like DMC and it'll convert it and it'll tell you what other colors might belong in that color family. I found it fantastic. I think it's a great complement to Stitch Palette if you're using Stitch Palette online. And I just want to pass that on, CodyHoover.com. And again, I'll put the link down below. But if you're kind of struggling sometimes, do I use this color or this color? And does it look good? If you go in there, put in the color that you have, it'll convert it and give you a really nice choice to pick from if you don't happen to have that in your collection. Now let's get down to business. So a couple things I'm super excited about. First and foremost, I know several of you are aware that W. Wallace was an exclusive at the Attic, and I can't begin to thank Jean for her support and her encouragement and her love. Just the words of encouragement and the things that she has done to help me feel confident that maybe I do have something that others would find interesting. So if you recall, this is the original from W. Wallace. I'll give that a little bit of a tilt there. And W. Wallace is an exclusive, or was an exclusive through December 31st at the Attic in Mesa, Arizona. And as of January 1st, it is now available on my website, as well as through your local needlework shop. So again, thank you, Jean. Thank you for your kindness and your generosity. And I've said this before, and not laughing at me when I had this crazy idea that I wanted to reproduce samplers. You have no idea how much your encouragement has meant to me. So W. Wallace, here's the chart, is now available to anyone, whether you live in Arizona or are going to Arizona. And it's also available from your local needlework shop. And if you want it kitted or you just want the chart, I know Jean and her team will be happy to send it to you as well. So it's a fun little stitch. And I love the idea that we don't really know who W. Wallace is, but I make the argument in the chart that I think I know who it was. And I think I know why she stitched what she stitched. I also want to call your attention up here to that blue jar. Now, I've made this comment before. I think I did it like on my first episode, but if you're just now joining me, you might not be aware. Why do I have a blue jar in every chart that I put out? Well, here's that blue jar. And this blue jar holds all of my threads from the last year plus. And this is a jar that belonged to my mother. And my mother passed away about 3.5 years ago. And I decided that on every chart that I put out, I was going to include this in some way, shape, or form. And so I've done that. It's my way of honoring her and letting others know that I had an amazing mother. She raised 4 very headstrong, very independent, very confident women, and I'm very grateful for that. So this is my visual reminder, and I would encourage you, as you are stitching things and taking pictures and sharing them with your loved ones, think about the things that mean the most to you and start to include those in your photos. When you're putting something on Instagram, put your mom's favorite spoon, if she had a spoon that she stirred tea with, or maybe she had a pair of scissors, or maybe your mother just had a favorite book. Just include that in your photos, and it's just a nice way of feeling connected to your mother, whether she's alive or not. And as I said, you'll see my mom's blue jar in all of my charts in some way, shape, or form. So wanted to make sure that you were aware of why I had this crazy blue jar. It is called a Horlick malted milk jar. And some of you have heard this before, but my mother loved not shakes, but malts. And I just love this. It says Horlicks on the lid, and it's a beautiful blue-green jar. So Horlicks mason jar, and I will be continuing to add more threads to it. So let's get down to the exciting part today of what we really probably should be talking about the most. I want to tell you a little story about 3 girls. And the first girl I want to talk about is a girl named Dorothy Sterrett. And Dorothy Sterrett was born in 1835 in Derbyshire, England. And her father was a farmer, and her mother basically ran the household. And Dorothy was the second child of 8 children. That's a lot of kids, right? Second child of 8 children. And as you read through the story that I've included in the narrative around Dorothy, you find that mom and dad had children very rapid succession. They came very close together, and there were a lot of them. There were 8 of them, right? Well, when Dorothy was born in 1835, her father passed away when she was 13 in 1848. And the sad thing about her father passing away is that when her father passed away, it wasn't too long after that her mother passed away. And when her mother passed away, she left 7 children, 6 plus Dorothy, with no parents. And I can't imagine what that's like, to be left without any parents and to be small children, but she was left with no parents. I did find out that Dorothy was a student, and she was taken under the wing of a woman who ran a boarding house. Whether that was an orphanage or whether they paid for her to be there, I don't know. My guess is it was a boarding house for orphan children. I also was able to discover that after she was at the boarding house, she passed away when she was 23. So Dorothy didn't have a very long life. And also, I want to call out, this is the original sampler. This is the original. You can see that the black has run. And the reason the black runs typically is prior to 1850, 1855, 1860, the fibers that were being used were more plant. And so they weren't synthetic, and they didn't have hold fast dye. And I love that there is that bleeding through. But what I love the most is her choice for the verse. It's one of my favorite verses from the Bible. It says, Jesus said, suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. Mark chapter 10. And you'll notice on the original here, she substitutes the word, she splits the word little, and she does chap 10, but we know what it is, right? And the reason I think she chose this verse, if you want to know the truth, my theory on it is, by the time that Dorothy was 9, her mother had buried 1 child and was raising 6 others. As the oldest sibling, it's highly likely to believe that Dorothy had to assist in the daily work associated with raising children. Perhaps in choosing the scripture, Dorothy sought the hope that heaven offered as a reward for the hardships and the heartache that she witnessed in her early life. See, I think she stitched that because it gave her hope. And I think that she stitched that because she believed deeply that there was life beyond the one that we currently have. So I want to show you the model. This is the little model. I love this little model. I will tell you that Dorothy Sterrett, believe it or not, took 3 skeins, not quite 3 skeins, of Swamp Water by Weeks Dye Works. And I love, as you kind of look at it a little closer, you can see there's some modeling. The fibers were Weeks Dye Works. It was stitched on 40 count from Fox and Rabbit on 40 count flannel flower. So if you like this and you want a single colored sampler, you don't have to do it in the original color. You could do it in red. It'd be beautiful in red. You could do it in blue. but you can see the difference in size here. It's sometimes hard to do this in a mirror, right? You can kind of see the difference in size. She's not a very big one originally, and she's definitely not a very big one finished, but I found a lot of peace stitching her. I just thought she was really beautiful, and I loved the verse that Dorothy chose, and that sampler is available, download or as a printed booklet, as well as from your local needlework shop. And Jean will also have this available next week out at the attic. So thank you, Jean, for having that out there, and I'll have the model out there as well. Now, the other little girl I want to tell you a little bit about is a little girl, believe it or not, that I didn't know her name. In fact, her name was G. Hubbard. And I thought, oh, good grief, how am I ever going to find out who G. Hubbard was, right? I'd already been down the rabbit hole with W. Wallace. How was I going to find G. Hubbard? Well, let me tell you how I found G. Hubbard. This is the original of G. Hubbard. Let me put this against some paper. This is the original of G. Hubbard. I believe it's the original frame. And let me turn this over. Some of you saw this in the last floss tube, but let me turn this over. You'll notice that the stitching is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the only difference is everything's backwards, right? There are no tails, there are no stragglers, there are no carries. I mean, G. Hubbard, she knew what she was doing because she stitched in a very beautiful fashion. So this is the model, and Polly Kalich actually stitched this for me. And I've got on a little piece of paper. I will have the model at the attic next week, and it's going to be in a little shadow box. So make sure you take a look at it, but it is absolutely beautiful. And a shout out to Vicki and Megan from Needlework Press for teaching me as well as Polly how to do that hem stitch around. So I think it's very beautiful. And if you happen to stitch W. Wallace, you have two of the gumnut silks that were used in the model. The blue and the red were taken directly from that blue and red that were used in W. Wallace. And then I also have used like a tan brown. The conversion on it not only includes gumnut silks, but also SWA 103, Weeks Dye Works, and DMC. So there's lots of choices on there. But let me tell you a little bit about G. Hubbard. So sometimes when you're hunting for the person that stitched a sampler, it can be really challenging, right? You get little tiny breadcrumbs, and then you have to follow those breadcrumbs to see if you can find who that little girl was. Well, when I started, as I mentioned last time, when I started looking for G. Hubbard, I actually kind of convinced myself that maybe it wasn't G. Hubbard. Maybe it was stitched by somebody named G.H., and they were on Ubba Road at Trinity School. So I looked that up. Of course, that didn't exist, right? There was no Ubba Road. And then I started finding Trinity schools, and I literally sent emails to probably 16, 17, 18 Trinity schools to see if any of them had any records from 1889 that would help me know who G. Hubbard was. I struck out. So then I thought, well, I'm going to go back to the individual I purchased it from. And as I shared in my last Floss Tube episode, I was able to connect with the individual that sold me the sampler. And that individual told me that he had purchased it from a nephew who was the nephew of the original woman who stitched it. And her name was Grace Ellen Hubbard. And she lived in Whitstable, which led me down a whole new rabbit hole. And I was able to not only find out more about Grace Ellen, but also really kind of see how her life unfolded. And Grace was born in 1876 in Somerset, England, to a 25-year-old father and a 24-year-old mother. And she was the second of 5 children. We also know that she stitched her sampler when she was 11 years old at Holy Trinity School in Whitstable. And the thing that I love, as I mentioned before, is that the front and the back are mirrors. It's identical. It's perfect. We know that Grace never married, and that she actually became a cook and lived with 3 elderly sisters later in her life, which I think is funny. They lived in a red brick 2-story house. And we know that Grace Ellen died in 1965. Now, what I think is pretty cool about that is she died during my lifetime. I was 2 years old in 1965, and she was 86 years old, never married, and she had no children. And had it not been for her nephew, the sampler would have been lost. So if you want to read more about G. Hubbard or Grace Ellen Hubbard, in the chart, it's a very small little chart. You are more than welcome to do so. Again, G. Hubbard is available from your local needle workshop. It's available online from Red Barn Samplers, and it's also available, as I mentioned before, from Jean at the Attic. So here is the original, and then here is the model. Equally as beautiful and very small, would look great finished as a little pin keep, would look great in a dough bowl, would look great in any red, white, and blue collection as well. So if you're looking to add something that's small, or you haven't started your blessing sampler for the year, I would encourage you to do so. I was online today and someone had asked what's a blessing sampler, and it wasn't my post, but I loved that they referred to Nicola Parkman from Hands Across the Sea and her episode where she spoke to that about, start something small that brings you joy and think about the blessings from the year to come. So if you're looking for kind of a blessing sampler, this might be the one to start. Now, the last one I want to share with you that's also being released today, when you look at this, you're like, yeah, that's kind of not too fun, too exciting, right? But what drew me to this was it's not a traditional green and red sampler. When I acquired it, it was not framed, so I had access to the back. And honest to goodness, the colors are a kind of a red orange and a teal green. And I really liked that. It wasn't that traditional red and green. And so you'll notice here, this is Mary Barker. And Mary Barker stitched this when she was 11 years old in Muncaster School. And let me give you an example of the difference between the sizes. Yeek, right? Difference between the sizes. There we go. And let me tell you a little bit about Mary Barker. So the thing that I love about Mary Barker was that she was born in Cormy in Cumbria, England in 1890. And she was the first child born to the family between William and Ruth. And the daughter, she was the oldest of 8 children, which is a lot, right? We also know that Mary's brother Robert was born in 1892, so she was very small when he was born. And that her brother William was born in 1893. So bing, 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 3 very small children. And that we know that William and Ruth had a large family. And that when records reveal that Mary had 2 brothers who died as infants, but between that time, she also had multiple siblings. Also, she only went to school till she was about 14, because the census records show that she worked as a domestic servant for George William Lupton. And the Luptons were a large landowner, a large family with lots of land who employed many people to work on their property. In 1911, we know that Mary married William, or Willie Stokes, and they had 1 child. They had 1 child named Ernest that went by Ernie. And census records and additional research indicate that Mary spent time as a homemaker, taking care of her husband, Willie, and her son, Ernie. There was no work outside of the home that is listed in any records I was able to find once she got married. And we know that Mary died in 1932 at the age of 42. So again, if you're looking for kind of a fun little 2-color sampler, I would encourage you to take a look at Mary Barker. The model for this was stitched on 36 count Nantucket Brew from R&R, and I used Weeks Dye Works on this. The 3 colors were Isla Morada, Fire, and Mascara. Again, I love this. I think it's a fun little sampler, and it's stitched very fast. So if you're looking for something to add to your collection that's that traditional marking sampler, this would be one that you could take a look at. So I don't really have any other sampler updates, but I do have a couple tech tips for you. So my friend said to me, you should really show people how they can take something from one text message and then forward it to somebody else on their phone. And I thought, that is a great idea. So if I just have a text message here from my good friend Pam, and you can kind of see here, Pam and I were texting today about what we happened to see at a store in Wichita, and I wanted to forward this picture to my sisters. If I tap on the picture, it enlarges the picture, and then I have down here, I have a choice of the share arrow. I have another arrow that points to the left, and I have a plus. So if I click on the share arrow, it gives me a choice of all these things I can do with it, right? So if I want to copy that, if I want to save it, if I want to move it to something like Pinterest so again, that's what the first little arrow is. But the second little arrow, which is in the middle there, if I tap on that, then across the top here, I could choose who I want to send that to by tapping on their name and hitting send. I love that because it's very quick and very easy to do. I also think it's interesting that sometimes when you are texting, you're not always aware that you're in a group, right? And so when you hit reply, it goes back to everybody. The nice thing about it is if you're in a group, let's say I'm in a group with all three of my sisters up here, and if I want to reply, it goes back to that whole group. But if I want to reply to just one of them, if I tap on the picture at the top of my three sisters, now it has three people. There's a little arrow. It pulls down who those people are, and then I can tap on their name and I can get my sister's information. Her name's Joy. And then down through this, there's a link that says send message. And I could just send that directly to her. And that way I don't have to bother my other two sisters, which is kind of nice. So let me go through that one more time. I'm in a group chat. I tap on the picture or the image up there that represents the group chat. At the very top, there's an arrow pointing to the right. It expands the people in the chat. So I click on that. And then if I want to just send it to my sister Joy, it pulls up her contact information. I scroll down and there's the choice to send message. And then I could just send it to her. So if I'm planning a surprise birthday party for sister number 4 and I don't want her to know about it, I can send that message to either sister number 2 or sister number 3. And then we can discuss things without sister number 4 knowing about it. So I love that idea. I also think that sometimes we carry around these devices and they're so powerful that there's no way that we can know everything that they'll do. So again, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sharing, letting me share my exciting news with you about my 3 samplers. Dorothy Sterrett, again, here's Dorothy, love Dorothy. And then also G. Hubbard, the little one here, she will be in a shadow box out at the attic. And then lastly, Mary Barker. And if you're looking to add things to your collection, these would be simple ones to stitch, no specialty stitches, and very quick stitches as well. Also not a lot of investment in fibers. So if you're just now getting started with stitching samplers and you wanted to stitch one, but you didn't want to have to buy 15 or 20 colors, all 3 of these would be great choices. And then lastly, I want to let you know that I do have 4 more that will be coming out probably the end of February. And equally as delightful and clearly ones that I loved. I told myself when I started this, I was not going to reproduce anything I didn't want to hang in my own house. So I have only chosen things that I like and hopefully you like them as well. So again, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for your lovely, lovely comments, your encouragement. I have really worked hard to reply to everyone that leaves me a comment, whether it's a thumbs up and a thank you or a thumbs up, and I appreciate this, but there's something that I take the time to respond to you because you've taken the time to respond to me. So thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Watch for more updates on social media, subscribe to the channel, share it with others, and may your floss never twist. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.